What does it mean to have empathy? Every piece of good art needs one simple thing in order to make people feel something. Empathy. A great piece of art, and especially a great film in my opinion, shows us every character as a whole, so even if we don't agree with them and what they do, we can understand them. So in the spirit of empathy, I want to talk about one of the warmest, most empathetic shows I've seen in a while. Ted Lasso. I know, everyone's been shitting on it recently, sometimes a bit justified and other times not. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about why I love Ted Lasso and why I think it's so much more important than people give it credit for. Ted Lasso follows the often comedic misadventures of an American football coach who moves across the world to England to coach a top-tier football team. The real football. It's a funny concept, sure, and it's kind of why I didn't expect much going into it, but even from its first episode, it establishes two key ideas that prove that the show has so much more depth than it seems. One, Rebecca Welton, the owner of AFC Richmond, hired Ted to tank the team in hopes of getting back at her ex-husband, the team's previous owner. And two, Ted is currently going through his own marital issues. Those two concepts established in an otherwise basic pilot hooked me. Let me know from the start that the show wasn't just, American man doesn't like tea and crumpets. I mean, they do make those jokes, but they aren't the focus. Half of the show is all about the football team, but more importantly, Ted trying to teach them all to
be the best versions of themselves on and off the field.
Of course, he initially fails. A lot. Between the team pushing back and Rebecca sabotaging him at every turn, it's hard for him to take ground. But he never gives up. He rarely gets mad, and when he does, it's explainable. He always treats his players with respect, treats them like people, not players. To the fans that treat him like shit even, he gives them respect. And to Rebecca, who steps in his way and lies to him for months, he says this.
I forgive you.
You... what? Why?
Divorce is hard.
This is what the show is all about, and what it's trying to say. Not to have forgiveness, but to be understanding. Having Ted go through the same issues that push Rebecca to ruin Richmond, having them be two sides of the same coin, gives them both a chance to understand each other, and it reveals the foundation of Ted's ideology.
I was never going to let anybody get by me without understanding they might be hurting inside, you know?
That's the empathy I'm talking about. An understanding that people have their own struggles. An understanding that comes from tragedy in Ted's own life.
My father had killed himself when I was 16.
Ted isn't just a super optimistic guy. I mean, he is optimistic, but he isn't without his own struggles. He suffers from his own anxiety, going through a messy divorce 4,000 miles away, being separated from his son, and never fully processing the suicide of his father. That's what spawned not his hopeless optimism, but his dedication to have empathy for everyone around him, because he knows exactly what it feels like to be at your lowest. And Ted isn't even just a static character that acts only as a conduit for the growth of others. He has an arc spanning the entire show about learning to have empathy for himself, to give himself the same chances he gives everyone else. But while we're on the topic of growth, we can't ignore the character with arguably the best arc in the show, Jamie Tartt. Richmond's star striker with an ego bigger than the entire rest of the team combined. Through the first half of the first season, we see him as nothing but an ass for 99% of the time. But that other 1%, that's what sets him off on a path to being a better man.
So, I made a vow to be so tough that he could never call me soft again. I wonder if sometimes I forget about making her proud.
After he gets sent back to his actual team, we don't see him for a while until the final episode, where we see two pivotal moments in his arc. First, we see a lesson of Ted's actually get through to him in the game-winning shot, and second, we see the source of his inner struggle, his father's abuse towards him. That's something I'll get back to, but continuing on Jamie's arc. His development isn't just an overnight switch, but a subtle shift in mentality over 3 whole seasons. His change is most noticeable in Season 2 when he comes back to Richmond. Ted was reluctant to bring him on, but they both need each other for different reasons. Ted needs a star player, and Jamie needs a team to take him. In reality, though, Jamie needed someone that would believe in him, that would light a fire in him to be better.
Want me to tape?
What do you think you're doing?
We're a team, aren't we? Gotta wear the same kit.
Moments of his change are sprinkled across his second season, but by season 3, we see him as a calmer, kinder, more understanding player. But in season 3, his biggest problem arises: why he plays. His whole reason for being the best, for being tough, for being an ass, was to keep his dad off his back. Without that fuel, without that need to protect himself, he had no reason to play. Well, almost no reason. He just needed a reminder.
Now listen to me. I don't care if you lose by 10 goals tomorrow. I just want you to be happy. Okay, son?
This quiet, touching moment finally reminds Jamie to play for himself, to play for love and not hate. Ted's culture of trust and understanding helps so much of the team grow. It helps Roy, an old star faded by the years, find a new passion in the game that left him behind. It helps Rebecca learn to move on from her past and embrace her own life. And it helps Nate. Well, I actually want to talk more about Nate, because he's one of my favorite characters in the whole show, and I think he has one of the most interesting arcs in a comedy possibly ever. Nate Shelley starts as a nervous wreck of a kit man, a silly side character with a surprising knack for coaching. By the end of the first season, Ted and the gang hire him as an actual coach, which is where things get interesting. Nate starts off awkward and unassuming until he actually gets the chances to prove himself as a coach, as his confidence builds. At the same time, he starts to feel like his place as Ted's student is slipping when Roy gets hired as a coach as well. Over the second season, we see Nate fall further and further into his own fears, so much that he lashes out at anyone he sees as a threat to his place. This fall from grace culminates in the final game of the season, where Nate lets out all his feelings about Ted.
You made me feel like I was the most important person in the whole world. And then you abandoned me. And I worked my ass off trying to get your attention back.
And if I didn't tell you how important you were to me enough, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're not. You're full of shit. Just fuck you, Ted.
This wasn't actually how Nate felt about Ted, but he was so afraid to lose his status that he had no other way to express these feelings other than lashing out. Nate was the one person whose caring nature didn't help because Nate didn't have enough self-confidence to be anyone without the approval of others. When that love that Ted gave him was jeopardized, it turns him into an angry person, and expressing that abandonment to Ted doesn't make Ted mad, but makes him realize that he made Nate feel the same way he did after every tragedy in his life. Season 3 picks right back up with Nate heading to West Ham, newly purchased by Rebecca's ex-husband. Nate, desperate for his new boss's approval, becomes a mini version of him, in order to gain confidence. I'll be honest, Nate's arc surprised me the most. I was expecting the writers to make him a traditional villain only to turn himself around at the end of the show. But no, they treat him like a regular guy going on with his life, with his entire conflict coming from navigating a new workplace where he doesn't have the support like Ted. He's lost for the first half of the season, until he meets, or re-encounters, Jade, a hostess at his favorite restaurant. A chance encounter of kindness from her sets Nate on a journey to be a bit better, and his relationship with her helps him quit in not a bombastic moment, but a quiet moment that doesn't even happen on screen. What matters is not that he quits, but how he moves on, how he remembers the love of those around him and uses it to give him the confidence to be better. He eventually returns to Richmond, albeit as a kitman once more, but he owns it. He finally apologizes to Ted, finally understanding all the lessons Ted tried to teach him. It took a while, but Ted never gave up on him. Ted always knew what abandonment felt like to Nate, and he never held any of it against him. I loved how quiet, how simple, how honest to the character Nate's plotline was. It never got too bombastic because it never needed to be. It genuinely is one of my favorite subplots in any show just because of how well it ties into the themes of everything the show is trying to say.
I forgive you. I offer you a job. The life part's up to you.
And there's so much more I could talk about, but there was one moment in one of these last episodes that really sums up exactly what I'm saying.
Credit where it's due. Lasso rolled the dice on Tartt's fitness and the team's talisman rose to the occasion.
Why? Why did they include this one shot, this one moment? Why did they establish Jamie's abusive father only to show him changing himself for the better? Can an abusive parent be redeemed? I'll be honest, I don't know. I have never gone through that, and I won't pretend to know what it's like or give an answer that I can't be confident of. But the point of this shot, this moment, is the core philosophy of the show. That everyone deserves a chance to change, that everyone deserves a chance to be understood, that everyone deserves empathy, and you can't promote empathy if you don't have it for everyone in your story. Ted Lasso doesn't just show us the good or just the bad, it shows us everything in between just so we can understand what everyone is going through. That is empathy. And that's why I'm kind of getting sick of people shitting on the show every second of every day. Is it perfect? Hell no. I had a boatload of problems with the last season, especially from overstuffing itself with characters to losing focus on its whole concept, and maybe even forgetting to have empathy for some of its less important side characters. Shandy. But I've heard countless people say that the only reason the show got popular was because it's a feel-good show that came out at the right time, and that's just wrong. We need a show like this to remind people to have empathy, because it sure seems like we're all forgetting to have it. That's why Ted Lasso matters, and that's why empathy matters.